Get started with the introduction. I know it usually takes people a couple minutes to show up, but there's a number of people in here, and anything I say is the least important part of this entire presentation. Hello, good afternoon. Happy Valentine's Day to everyone who's joining. Not to be cheesy, but it is kind of a sweet thing to be able to talk about when we talk about solar, and we talk about all of the new and exciting, rich solar incentives that we're seeing with the Inflation Reduction Act today. The purpose of this presentation is really to get everybody up to speed on some changes to HPD's Solar Where Feasible program, and to talk about these new incentives and some of the new things that, or new tools, I should say, to underwrite solar for affordable housing. I'm not going to talk much more than that, but I'd love to introduce our friends at Solar One. For anybody who doesn't know, we've been working with Solar One for a long time, but kicked off our Solar Where Feasible program a few years ago to respond to local laws 92 and 94, which require solar or green roofs. When we partnered up with Solar One, I don't think we knew how impactful the program would be and how much they would help build capacity around solar for affordable housing. So I have nothing more to say other than to introduce Carly and Annika from Solar One, and they will talk about solar. And yes, Mark Ginsburg, DEP requirements have been intersecting and now are part of our Solar Where Feasible language and thinking. So thank you for that. I'm gonna go off camera.
Thank you.
And take over.
Okay, thanks so much, Jen. We're really excited about this. My name is Annika Wister-Jones. I'm the director of the Here Comes Solar program within Solar One, which is our technical assistance program. Just to quickly go over the agenda, we're going to do some introductions like Jen just did. We'll talk about a brief Solar 101 and then go into the new incentives in 2023 and 2024 that have just been rolled out. And we'll then talk about the updates to our Solar Where Feasible program and the tool and some resources that we have. And we'll do a brief discussion of the New York City solar policy. Thanks a lot for the spoiler, Mark. And then we'll have some Q&A at the end. So feel free to put questions in the chat and we can answer them either as we go if it makes sense, or at the end if there's something larger on people's minds. Okay, let's move forward. So just a quick introduction of Here Comes Solar. We are part of an environmental education nonprofit, which is Solar One. And Here Comes Solar specifically, we work to make solar accessible to everyone who might not have easy access to it on the normal solar market. So we provide education and technical guidance to collaborate with communities to build an inclusive energy transition. We do site assessments, we do knowledge building like this workshop, we do incentive consultation and financing. We help people select a solar installer who will do the work at a reasonable price and at a high quality, and then we can help with advocacy during the installation if necessary. The Solar Where Feasible program, like Jen said, kicked off officially in 2020 in response to local law 92 and 94 and 97. And it requires, as I think probably most of you know by now, that everyone do a solar feasibility analysis and then include solar when it's financially beneficial to the building. So that means if there's a 10-year payback period or less, but it's not required if it's over 10 years. And that's to kind of work between the both very good desires to go green and have sustainability, but also make sure that things are still financially smart for affordable housing, where the funding is the most important. NYSERDA funds our partnership, and we are able to do technical assistance for any building that receives HPD money, so new construction, preservation, asset management. Since we first started, we've helped incorporate over 12 megawatts of solar in 169 new buildings and 192 existing buildings, which is a really huge impact, and we're really excited about that. So briefly on local laws 92 and 94, this is for new roofs, and it requires that either a green roof or solar be included in the sustainable roofing zone of all new roofs. And one thing that we should note is that when this first came out, there was an exemption for affordable housing. And so that's where the solar where feasible tool came about. But starting in November 15th of this year, that exemption will no longer apply. And so all buildings with new roofs, so mostly all new buildings, will be subject to local laws 92 and 94. So there will be no option to have a financial waiver from HPD. So I will pass it on to Carly to do a brief Solar 101.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Annika. Hi, everyone. My name is Carly Ayukawa, and I'm a program manager at Solar One, and I mainly focus on helping to run HPD's Solar Where Feasible program. So on these next few slides, I'm going to be covering the basics of how solar works in New York City. This diagram is a beautiful but very simplified illustration of how solar works. So starting at number 1, the solar panels are installed on a rooftop, and they are absorbing sunlight and turning that into electricity. And then the electricity is run through a conduit, typically into the basement where the electrical room is. And this is where the inverter comes in. The inverter transforms the direct current electricity that's produced by the system into alternating current electricity, which is a type of electricity that we can actually use in our buildings. At point number 3, there's going to be a meter, and that meter is going to measure the amount of solar electricity that's generated by the system. And the system is tied into the Con Edison grid, as are all solar systems in New York City. And if there is any excess electricity, that gets sent back to Con Ed in exchange for credits on your electricity bill. So diving a bit deeper, solar is really great because it has a 25+ year operating life. That also means that it's best to install on new roofs. The industry standard is for solar panels to be warranted for 25 years. So if you've recently replaced your roof or got it resurfaced and re-warranted, or you have a roof that's in really excellent condition, now is a really great time to consider solar. Solar is amazing because there's almost no maintenance, there's no moving parts, and so there's not a lot of maintenance involved. And the panels themselves are installed on a tilt, and so they can be self-cleaning. If there's any dust or debris on them, the wind and the rain can help wash that away. This one might be obvious, but solar panels require direct sunlight, so you want to be cognizant of what's around you. Are there really tall buildings? Are there really tall trees that are going to shade out your rooftop? That's really important to note. And then finally, like I mentioned, all solar installations in New York City are tied into the Con Edison grid. So it's important to note that if Con Ed were to experience a blackout, your solar system is going to shut off, and that's to ensure the safety of the line workers that are restoring the grid. Now in New York City, we see 3 types of solar installations. I'll be going over things to consider when you're deciding which is best to pursue. Ballasted installations, as you can see on the left, are the lowest cost option. You can see in this photo that there is actually a cement block that would ballast the panels onto the roof. Because of this, there's very limited roof penetrations needed. And you can also see in this picture, there's some inter-row spacing, so like maybe a foot between the modules. We really recommend ballasted for buildings that are 100 feet or less, as the Department of Buildings has rules that make ballasted a bit harder to install on buildings that are greater than 100 feet. Next, in the center, we have mechanically attached arrays, which are also known as planar. These are raised 4 to 6 feet above the roof, so they can avoid some obstructions and allow for some access underneath. These are really good if you have a more space constrained, like narrow rooftop. because you can see there's no inter-row spacing. That means you can fit more solar onto your rooftop. There are like penetrations into the roof. And so these installations are best done when you're doing like a roof resurfacing so that the attachments could be made prior to applying the final layer of the rooftop, but it's not mandatory. And ultimately, your solar installer is going to ensure that your roof warranty is maintained. They'll work with the roof manufacturer to get that certification. And then finally, we have canopy installations, which are also known as like trellis or pergola mounted solar systems. These are raised 9 to 10 feet above a rooftop, and they can really maximize the amount of solar that fits on your building. You can see in the photo, they're like posts that actually are built into the parapet wall, as well as the roof surface. These are the most expensive forms of solar, usually adding around 20% to the cost. But there are co-benefits like being able to walk under the rooftop, access it, use it for leisure, and store like other mechanical equipment on top. So there's these 3 types of solar, and Solar One can help you determine what makes the most sense for you. So in New York City, we have like a very diverse building stock across all the boroughs, and not every building can support solar. So here's an example of a building that has solar and has a very viable rooftop. As you can see, it's a very sunny roof, has very minimal shading, maybe a little bit here for the parapet wall. It's a very large roof. They have a good amount of space, and the roof itself looks to be in excellent condition. I don't see any like leaks or any of that. So it works well with the solar panel lifespan of 25 plus years. The mechanical bulkhead here is clustered like in the north side of the building. So as the sun moves throughout the day, the shade that gets produced is going to go onto the street. It's not going to cover the panels and like reduce how much electricity they produce. And finally, you can see around the perimeter of the building, there's FDNY clear paths. So in the case of a fire, the fire department needs to be able to access the roof freely and without any obstructions. So if a building cannot install solar, that's fine. But the good news is that community solar is a really good option to almost everyone. If you have a Con Edison utility bill, it's a way to reap some of the benefits of solar without actually installing it on your property. And so with community solar, the way it works is that you subscribe to a piece of a larger solar project offsite, and it costs you nothing to subscribe. You have guaranteed electricity bill savings around 10% a month, and you can help to support new local solar projects. It moves with you, even if you move apartments. There's no cancellation fee. And so personally, I'm a community solar subscriber. I save a couple dollars a month, and it sometimes might feel like not much, but it really adds up over time. And so if you'd like to learn more about community solar, I encourage you to email our community solar team at enrollment@solar1.org. As well, we've linked the information hub that our community solar team created on our website. It's a really valuable like one-stop shop to learn about all things community solar. And I'll pass it back to Annika to dive into the costs, incentives, and savings of solar.
Thanks, Carly. And I know that this question is going to come up. So yes, we will be sharing the slides afterwards. We'll also be putting them on the resources webpage after the fact. So you'll have access to this afterwards and all the links. So just overview, when a solar installer gives you a price, that price is turnkey. And so that means that it includes their site visit, the contracting, the design, the engineering, the permitting for the work, and the equipment, labor, and installation, and making sure that all of everything is signed off, including, like Carly mentioned, making sure that the roof warranty is maintained through the solar installation. One thing it doesn't include is if there's a GC markup, the solar installer price doesn't include that. But everything from the very beginning of the concept to the very end of permission to operate, which is the final step, is included in the solar installer's price. Once you've paid for it, then you start saving money. That's the concept of saving money with solar. And so there's two different ways that you save money with solar. One of them is solar energy, electricity savings, and the other one is through incentives. Using both of those things, most multifamily projects in New York City typically have somewhere between a 5 to 12 year payback period. This past year, we've seen even lower paybacks, maybe 2 or 3 years for many projects. And that depends on what incentives are available and obviously the cost and complexity of the system. Incentives make a really big difference. And so depending on which incentives you're eligible for, it could be closer to 3, 4, or 5 years, or it could be closer to 12 to sometimes 15 or 20 years, depending on that. And one thing to note here is that, one last thing on that is that even after the 25-year lifetime that we use in our analysis, solar will usually continue to produce electricity savings for many, many years. So it could have even more savings than are captured in our analysis here. So utility bills, this is the main way that you get solar savings. These are solar is usually connected to your common area owner paid electricity bills. We usually see that for larger buildings, maybe buildings with elevators, that's about a 50% reduction, more or less, depending on the size and shape of the building. And for EL2, for those small commercial, usually walk-up buildings, you can usually offset the entire common area and maybe some more. Maybe you could potentially offset some resident bills as well. These savings depend on the rate, so that large commercial or small commercial rate. If it's master metered, usually the percentage is very low, obviously, because the usage is so high, but the dollar value could be very high. And it also depends on the system size, how much space you have, what other things are going on the roof. And then the other financial element here is tax incentives. I'm not going to go through every single one of these because there's a lot, but like I said, we'll be sending this out after the presentation. And the most important ones are the New York Sun incentive from NYSERDA. This is guaranteed for anyone who goes solar in the city according to NYSERDA's rules. And for affordable housing, it's between $1.60 per watt and $2 per watt. That's usually paid directly to the installer at the end of the project. So that's guaranteed. There's also the federal tax credit, which we'll be talking about more. It's at least 30% of the system cost. And it's very easy for for-profit buildings to take it as a tax credit. It's now pretty easy for nonprofit buildings to take it through what's called direct pay or elective pay. There's just a separate form that you need to fill out to receive that. And it's possible to take for an owner-occupied co-op or condo, but you might need to either distribute it to the shareholders themselves for their personal income taxes, or there might be some options through transferability, but that's still in the works. It's a very new thing and it hasn't been fully fleshed out yet. There's also a state tax credit that is only for owner-occupied buildings, so only co-ops and condos and single-family homes. And then there is the New York City solar property tax abatement, which is only eligible if taxes are owed. So sometimes co-ops and condos, sometimes for-profit rental buildings. For HPD buildings, often that's not the case, but it's possible. And then for some buildings, you can take the accelerated depreciation, but that is also very much dependent on the building's specific circumstances. To go more deeply into the federal tax credit, this is the thing that changed in 2022 with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. This allows for a 30% tax credit that includes additional bonuses up to 40, 50, hypothetically even 60 or 70%, although we haven't actually seen that in practice. It also allows for nonprofits to take the tax credit through elective pay, and this transferability, which means that someone theoretically could sell tax credits if they can't take them themselves. They could sell tax credits to someone else, but the mechanisms for that haven't been fully fleshed out yet. One of the bonus credits that is an option, so instead of 30%, you could conceivably get a 40% federal tax credit, is the low-income community bonus. So the eligibility for this is determined based on the new markets tax credit map, which, as you can see, is a large percentage of New York City. You have to pre-apply for this tax credit and then receive an allocation, and then you can place the solar installation in service and claim it. So you need to make sure that you apply for this before the system is fully installed and turned on. We have there's a lot of information on this. The IRS has guidance. We've made some guidance. There's a lot of good info, so you can reach out to us if you want more information on this one. Another one that's really important for HPD is the low-income residential building project. So this is for federally funded affordable housing. So if you get any kind of federal funding, if that's LIHTC or Section 8 or anything like that, and then the solar energy has to have the financial benefits distributed equitably. But HUD has a very convenient document that lists out many different ways that you could comply with that rule. And it's actually fairly flexible. So it seems like many, if not most, buildings that are federally funded residential rental buildings might be able to take this benefit. But again, it's kind of complicated, so reach out to us and we can give you more information. Direct pay is for tax exempt entities. So usually the 501 entities, also states and political government subdivisions. You basically, like I said, just need to pre-register with a fairly simple form, and then fill out a tax form, and they'll count it as if you had overpaid your taxes by the price of the abatement or by the tax credit. And so then you just receive a check from the government in the same way that someone who overpaid on their personal income tax gets a refund. And like I said, transferability is, it's not eligible if you are eligible for elective pay. So it's only taxable entities. And you still need to do the pre-filing registration, and you need to find someone who will pay for the tax credit and buy it, usually at a discount. It sounds like discounts are somewhere between 5 and 15%, depending on the size of the system. This is a very, very new market, and so we think there will be more information to come as people develop more clearinghouse marketplaces and platforms to do this. As of right now, it's mostly for very large systems. If you have a tax credit of maybe $1 million or more, but we're hoping that this will open up to smaller projects in the near future. Okay, I'll pass it back to Carly.
Thanks, Annika. So for the next few slides, I'll highlight the major updates to HPD Solar Refeasible Program. So starting with the tool itself, for the past few months, we've been working really hard to make the tool more accurate and easier to use and act upon, which has resulted in version 2.4. This has been uploaded to HPD Solar Refeasible webpage 10 minutes ago, so it's live and I encourage you to check it out. But in the meantime, I have some screenshots that showcase or preview a few of the updates we've made. So starting with the building inputs tab, what we've done is make some edits to make it simpler and easier to understand and more intuitive to fill out the inputs. We've also added a page for multiple building projects. So if you're working on an HPD project that has like 4 or 5 buildings, you can now use the tool to input all the information per building. And then Solar One will help to create a consolidated solar feasibility analysis for the project. So prior to this, we had like a separate Excel, a separate process, and we would conduct that over email. And so this is really going to help streamline the process. And then finally, this is a screenshot of the results page. And we've done a lot of reformatting to make it easier to interpret and like understand. And so we really are looking forward to having people use it and hear your feedback. And then we also made some key updates to the solar feasible process. The first is that all HPD approval forms must be signed by the HPD Sustainability Office. So to clarify, prior to this, moderate rehab projects would get reviewed and approved by their specific HPD project manager. And now moving forward, all projects, whether it's a new construction, moderate, sub, gut rehab, are all going to be approved by the Sustainability Office. And then the second major update is that as of July 1st, new construction projects are not required to submit a solar feasibility analysis. So please stay tuned as we issue further guidance about this phase out. So in addition to the tool and process updates, we implemented these process updates to align with HPD's new design guidelines. And so what this slide outlines is the guidance from before submitting your solar feasibility analysis to the submission, review, and sign off, the design phase, as well as bidding, costing solar, and the construction phase. And what we've highlighted are important things for your project team to consider, such as DEP's Unified Stormwater Rule, as well as stages where Solar One can assist and provide free technical assistance. So at the very beginning, we can help you actually complete the solar feasibility analysis. Even though we try to make the tool as user-friendly as possible, we know that some people may not have a great grasp of solar, and so we're really happy to guide you along that process. We also are able to rerun the analysis in later stages of the project. So when you get real numbers, we can rerun the analysis to evaluate if solar is still cost effective. And then let's say you do successfully incorporate solar into your scope of work. We're happy to assist you with the bidding process, evaluating solar proposals, and during construction, assisting you. We're really here to just demystify the solar process and serve as a resource so that you can successfully incorporate solar into your HPD project. So if you have any questions, just shoot affordable@solarone.org and email, and we can take it from there. All of this information is now published on HPD's website. So I really encourage you to go to this link and bookmark it. It is like a one-stop shop, like resource hub with all of our trainings, key links to the tool, to our intake portal, HPD's solar technical requirements, one-pagers so that you can learn more about solar. And in the next few weeks, we're going to be releasing another resource document called Solar for Development Teams. So I just encourage you to bookmark this page so that you can stay in the loop on all things solar and HPD. Now I'll pass it back to Annika.
Okay. Okay, so for the DP Unified Stormwater Rule, this is something that came out, I think, recently in the past month or so. This is for new projects that if they disturb 20,000 square feet of soil or create 5,000 square feet of new impervious surface, they need to assess the DEP stormwater requirements before solar. So usually for local law 92 and 94, either solar or a green roof is possible. But under this rule for some buildings, then a green roof might be required as part of the stormwater requirements. So if the solar were feasible process between now and November waives solar for financial reasons, that doesn't mean that it's an exemption from DEP's stormwater requirements. And we'd recommend, because you have this additional layer of requirements, that you assess your green roof need before you assess for solar. I should also note that solar and green roofs can often work really well together. Solar panels can provide shade and moderate the water and kind of microclimate of green roofs, and they can work really well together as well. City of Yes, or maybe City of Maybe, is another thing that came out this fall. This involved a bunch of changes that made it easier to go solar. One of the things that I personally love is that it removes the zoning coverage and setback requirements for solar. So if there are height restrictions or anything for the building step backs or requirements like that, solar no longer applies, or at least in any reasonable sized solar system, this doesn't apply for. It still is subject to FDNY requirements and to landmark LPC requirements. So this doesn't remove all requirements on solar, but it does make it a lot simpler to assess what the rules are. This also permits standalone solar on like parking lots, for example, or any space that is generally zoned as residential. And it permits energy storage systems as of right, which is really important for our overall resiliency as a city. So there's a lot more information about City of Yes that you can see here. But one thing that we really appreciate is that now up to for any kind of canopy system or low profile system, solar is allowable on pretty much every roof. The other thing I mentioned before is that Local Law 92 and 94 no longer will be waived for affordable housing. So this means that if you have a new roof, so that's almost always going to be a new construction or maybe a extremely gut renovation where you replace the entire roof and roof assembly. So that's, you know, like the concrete deck of the roof, for example, or all of the rafters of the roof. Then that means that Local Law 92 and 94 will be in effect. So you need to include solar or a green roof on the sustainable roofing zone. And I think that's it. We were working really hard to get a lot of information into a little bit of time. So I think we've got a good amount of time for questions. I know there's a bunch of questions in the chat. Before we move on to questions, I do want to say that, like Carly mentioned, we're going to be coming out with some new resources, and we're also going to schedule another training to follow up on this one that's just specifically about the solar feasibility analysis and the new solar feasibility process. So that'll be later on this spring. So keep an eye out for that training. And we look forward to diving more in depth into those documents. So going back to our questions, the first one I see in the chat, and feel free to add more, is Maureen asked, were the saving money with solar figures of 50% or 100% of electricity based on electrically heated or cooled common spaces? No, those are based on the numbers that we've seen historically. And so most buildings that currently exist don't have electrically heated or cooled common spaces. And I think that would be one of the factors that affects any given building. You know, some have more load than others, some have more roof space than others, but it's something that we can analyze in the solar feasibility tool. I don't know, Carly, do you want to go back and forth?
Sure, I see a question from Jen. So if any building owners are interested, oh wait, no. Because it is competitive, how easy are the bonus credits to get? At what point would a building owner know that they will receive the credit? So these are highly competitive bonus credits. They really help improve the payback periods of solar. And so what you could do is go to the Department of Energy bonus credits dashboard, and there's a breakdown of the different categories of bonus credits with the allocation available, the allocation that's been assigned, and what's remaining. And you can use that to gauge what is worth going for. And these applications are reviewed and approved on an ongoing basis. So it's like a rolling application process.
I can just add to that what we saw so this has only happened once so far, this process, but in the first round, projects that were net metered and applied for that 40% low-income communities adder mostly got it. Projects that were not net metered didn't all get it. So the community solar projects, there was a lot of uptake for that across the country. And so that one was oversubscribed. Projects that were the residential rental low-income benefit projects, those ones, they didn't use up all of the allocated funding. And so everyone who applied for that one got it. So I think in many cases, based on the information we have now, you have a pretty good likelihood of getting the 50% tax credit for affordable rental buildings, and a decent chance of getting the 40% tax credit for low-income communities if you are net metered or in a persistent poverty area. And other than that, maybe it's more of a toss-up. But we can go into that in more detail if anyone has more specific questions. I noticed Nicole asked for a repeat of the definition of a new roof. So this is a new roof or roof assembly is the official definition. And so yes, this means that the actual structural element of the roof, in addition to insulation and the top roof layer. That's what that means.
I see another question. Do you have advice for aligning solar incentives with other incentives like geothermal, building electrification, etc.? Annika, do you want to take that question on?
Not specifically for geothermal, although I'm sure you could get incentives for both. I know there are some Inflation Reduction Act incentives for building electrification that I'm pretty sure you can include solar in and vice versa. And in general, it's just always good practice to align upgrades more for planning purposes than for incentive purposes, but it's very important. The one that I know of that's very useful is that if you're doing a new roof and the roof is reflective and you can argue that the reflective surface of the roof is going to improve the production of the solar, then you can probably claim the solar tax credit on the portion of the roof that's next to the solar panels. And so that I think is a really good alignment as well. And the next one, Carly, is, can a two-family home owner take advantage of multiple credits?
Yeah, so there are the 30% federal tax credit applies to like 1 to 4 family as well as multifamily homeowners. and the bonus credit categories that Annika was going over. I don't have the exact answer, but on the links that we shared, it specifies the eligibility for stacking the bonus credits on the base federal tax credit.
I should say that the tax credits are based on the system. So if there's one system, there's one set of tax credits. And if you had two families that were splitting that, then it would be, 50-50 rather than 200%.
And I see a question in the Q&A. I wanted to ask about the DEP requirements again. Are you saying that the DEP green roof requirements will override solar requirements? Does this mean that a developer that wants to install solar may be prevented from doing so and would need to do a green roof if they can't afford both?
Jen, do you want to answer that?
Sure, I'll take a stab at answering this. I mean, ultimately, the DEP has jurisdiction, but the way the new stormwater rule works, wait, I should go on video, is that a green roof may be a requirement in order to solve the stormwater retention on a project. The focus of the DEP's requirement is a hierarchical approach, right? So if a building can't find another way that meets their criteria to address stormwater, that would be the first thing you have to do is implement a green roof. And the DEP, unless there's another way to satisfy the stormwater requirement that's not a green roof, the DEP is very likely going to push that as a requirement. So then obviously there's no payback, and then solar could either fit possibly on parts of the site that are not a green roof, or as Annika mentioned before, layered into a combined roofscape. I wish I had more information. HPD's about to post some new informative information from our friends at DEP, but it's not available at this moment.
Plus, I'm not sure what you mean by the comment that this may prohibit solar on the roof regardless of cost. Did you mean that it would require a green roof in that space, or that it would explicitly prohibit solar on the roof? Okay, yes. So I think that's true. And the only other thing I would note is that often solar and green roofs can work really well together. And so if that's possible to do that, then we'd encourage people to consider doing both solar and the green roof, because green roof is really great for stormwater retention and for the overall ecosystem of the city. But solar has more of a financial payback, and so it's better to be able to do both of them at the same time if you can. I'm extremely proud of ourselves for having finished this early. I was honestly very worried that we would go late. So does anyone have a section that it would be useful to go back and go into more detail on? We could also go through the new tool and actually show it in process, if that would be useful. Maybe Carly, since you're screen sharing, why don't you pull up the new tool, and if we get other requests in the meantime, we can do that afterwards.
And while we're waiting for that, I just want to remind folks that as we phase out of the solar feasibility exemption that the DOB currently allows, and as we phase our program for new construction only, Solar One will continue to be a resource to anybody who needs it. If you're a designer working on a new construction project and are interested in considering solar or optimizing solar or have questions about the procuring of solar or solar tax incentives, Solar One is available to help. That's part of our program, is to build capacity. So please do not hesitate to avail yourselves of those resources. And we will be putting out some new tools specifically for new construction, just to help folks do that in the absence of the actual analyses.
Okay, I'm pulling it up now. Sorry for the delay.
And yes, we'll be sending the presentation out after the to everyone who's registered, and we'll also put it on the website so that people can download it afterwards.
All right, can you see my screen with the Excel?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
You might want to zoom in a little bit if other people like me are on their laptops.
Okay. I cannot see my screen, so if Monica, you want to start, that would be great.
Sure. So this page is the instructions and assumptions tab. So this is where you can find any information about what went into the tool and what you can do with it. So if you know how to use it, you can always skip this this tab, but if you have questions, this is where you can go to find out answers. You can skip over to the project info tab. This is mostly for the HPD approval form. So this is where you'll put in basic information about the project. So the name according to HPD, the address or addresses if there are multiple, the number of buildings in the project. We have a line for the number of buildings proposing solar. If you're not sure what that is right now, depending on the analysis, then you can leave it on blank and we can fill it in at the end. We have a question here, 2 questions to kind of just jog people's minds. So like the question about efficiency or electrifying heating for common areas. If that's something that's part of the scope of work for a retrofit, then you should note that and then consider that as you go forward with the analysis. And similarly, if the building is subject to the DEP stormwater rules, then we should note that and take the solar requirement with a grain of salt. This also has the submission name and date, HPD information, and then at the bottom it has the kind of HPD side of if it's planning on incorporating solar and the various options. So if it's according to local NA 294 or not relevant, there's a bunch of drop downs for that. You can always put comments at the bottom there if you have specific information about the building that you want people to know. On the building info, this is where the calculations come from. So this is where we have the ownership type is if it's a co-op or a condo, or if it's nonprofit or for-profit rental. They put in prevailing wages, which would increase the cost, obviously, because of increasing the labor. Dwelling units is important for HPD's tracking, and the building height affects the cost of the system. So this is an important thing to put in. Estimated usable roof area. You can figure this out just on Google Maps if you don't have it otherwise, and create a shape around the roof and measure it that way. If you know that you have a canopy design, then you should put that in here. But if not, you can mark it as no, and that's totally fine. But we have some examples of when you might want to use a canopy. The next section is for incentive eligibility. We tried to make this section a lot more user-friendly and easy to read. So the first one is is the project eligible for the federal tax credit? And then the yes or no is what the reasons might be for that. So yes, if it's a nonprofit. Yes, if it pays taxes. know if it's a co-op that doesn't have tax liability, or no, there's some other reason, you can put it in the comments. So hopefully this should make it clearer about which tax credit type is available. Then there's the low-income housing tax credit project, and if it is, whether it's included in the basis. And then the property tax abatement is here. Many HPD projects have their property taxes already fully abated, but other buildings do have some property taxes that they pay. And so in that case, then the solar property tax abatement is eligible. The landmark district will increase the price if it is in a landmark district, because they have to go through the process. So that's important to fill out. And the qualifying census tract is useful to know about potential federal tax credits or bonus credits that you might be eligible for. Similarly, the federal housing program funding that helps us figure out whether it's worthwhile to pursue that 50% tax credit, which might be really valuable. The electric utility in New York City is almost always going to be Con Edison, except for the Rockaways because they're weird. The annual owner paid electricity costs, you can estimate this. There are some good guidelines from HDC if you don't have an estimate already. But as you do this estimate, remember to take into consideration if there's any efficiency or electrification work that will affect the baseline if it's an existing building. And then we've got master metered or elevator building. Those should be fairly self-explanatory. And then if you click on the orange button for advanced inputs, you should only use these if you know more about solar than usual. So we at Solar One use this fairly frequently, and some energy consultants will use this if you know exactly the system size, for example, or you know that the system is going to be a behind the meter net metering project. So if you have one single piece of information, you can put it in here and then you don't have to fill out anything else. We'd strongly recommend only filling in lines that you absolutely know the answer for and you're confident in. And if you want to go back, then if you want to clear everything, there's a button at the bottom of this where you can clear this and hide the advanced inputs. No one should really have to fill in the advanced inputs on their own if you don't want to. And then here's where you put the roof layout so that we can check the sustainable roofing zone and make sure that it makes sense. And then please put any information about that in the comments. So include any potential obstructions, any mechanical equipment that might go on the roof. If the building is over 70 feet and is required to do the local law 11 work, then make sure to account for the scaffolding and racking for that and so forth. And then the results will populate based on the information that you've provided. And we tried to make this, like Carly said, more intuitive. So we have the takeaways right at the top, the internal rate of return, the payback period, and the lifetime net savings. And then we have some system performance details of, how many kilowatt hours it's going to produce, what's the cost per watt. And then we have a box for the upfront cost. So what the total cost is, that is the amount that the installer would quote versus the NYSERDA incentive. And then the upfront cost incentive, that's the amount that's included in the budget usually. And then we have a separate box for the available tax incentives. Since these go to different people and different tax incentives are available at different times, we wanted to keep this kind of separate from the upfront cost. And so this shows both the federal tax credit. If you have a bonus tax credit, then it would show there. It also shows the other things like the residential tax credit or LIHTC. If you click yes, then those will show up. And then you can, if you're interested in learning the 25-year cash flow and seeing what each year will be, you can check it out here. And then once you're done with this, once you don't have that warning incomplete form showing anymore, you can click the Submit Solar Feasibility Analysis button, and it will go to our form where you upload it with just, name, address, and optional, any additional supporting documents if you want. So that's that. Yeah, as Jen mentioned, this is really useful to kind of check various different options. So I often use this to say, well, what happens if we did make this a canopy? How much more expensive and how much bigger would it suddenly turn out to be? What happens if we decided to pursue this other tax incentive, and so forth? So it's very user-friendly, hopefully, and it spits out information very quickly. Yes, the output of panels is in fact 25 years. In fact, they're warranted for that much, and any standard solar panel is warranted by the manufacturer, so that if it's not producing a minimum amount, usually it's like between 85 and 90% at the up to 25 years, then they'll replace the panel and make you whole on that front. So often we've even been seeing some 30-year warranties recently, and the expectation is that they could last much longer than that. So it seems like mostly the limiting factor for solar is actually more the lifespan of the roof rather than the solar panels. Okay. I think that's it. Thanks everyone for joining. See you in a couple months for the How to Ace Your Solar Feasibility Analysis workshop, and we'll send more information as our resources are increased. Thanks so much.